Welcome to the More Than Fitness podcast.
And welcome, responsible delinquents, to Minisode number 160 on the More Than Fitness podcast. I'm your host, Matt McLeod, and I am a little bit sick. So excuse the voice, excuse any sniffles or anything like that. I actually like a little bit of the deeper voice. Makes me sound older, makes me sound more mature. However, I do not like the consequences of being sick. However, I feel like everybody's getting sick. Literally, I think my brother and sister are both sick. I've talked to many people. They're also sick. And we're kicking this podcast off really well, talking about sick people. But that is not the topic of discussion for today. So the nasally voiced discussion for today is going to be how to approach dieting around the holidays, not only physically, but mentally as well, right? Because, assuming that you celebrate these holidays, we have Christmas coming up, we have Thanksgiving coming up, just lots of opportunities where people are going to be gathering and eating a plethora amount of food, right? And if you're somebody who is trying to diet through these holidays and you have possibly difficult experiences with holidays as well, because holidays for many people are very shitty times, right? For many reasons, but also because sometimes people like to make comments about maybe you've lost a lot of weight and people make comments on it, and maybe you're okay with that, maybe you're not, or maybe you've gained weight since the last holidays that you've seen people, and people want to make comments about that. And then of course you are eating lots of food, right? This is the time of year where overeating is kind of normalized, and that's actually kind of what I want to talk about today. There's kind of two different people that I'm talking to today. One is somebody who maybe they've had the luxury of never having to worry about overeating on the holidays, in the sense that it actually takes up some negative space in their mind. And what I mean by that is that if you haven't had to really think very hard about your holiday dinner, or you're not worried at all about any type of holiday dinner, well, then that's great. That's awesome. But I also know that some people listening to this, clients that I've worked with, they get anxious as they approach these holidays because they are very preoccupied with food. They want to make sure that they stay on track with things. And it's just a little bit more difficult to navigate. So you're either the person who hasn't really struggled with these types of things, or you're somebody who has struggled with these types of things. And the advice that I'm going to give is for both, for sure. But definitely tailored somewhat more to the latter person. So the very generic answer I think that I would give a lot of my clients, and that I would give to you if you are wondering how to approach this holiday season's approach eating at these meals, is going to be just the answer that most people give, which is like, hey, these are just a couple of meals throughout the entire year, a couple meals in the grand scheme of the total number of meals that you're going to eat over the weeks and months and throughout the entire year, is vastly going to outweigh the difference that these 1, 2, 3, 5 meals are going to make around the holidays, right? As long as you get back on track after you have these meals around the holidays, after you overeat on the holidays, well, then it's not going to make any difference. It's going to make very little difference to your progress in terms of fat loss and dieting. And so whether you should even diet in the first place through the holidays, I think is completely up to you and your mental state, really. I think that if you have no issues with dieting through it, and you're somebody who can, diet up until Thanksgiving, diet up until Christmas, and it's just another kind of day for you. And sure, you can enjoy the holiday meals, and then after that, you can get right back on track with things. Well, cool. That's great. I think that's what you should do. You probably shouldn't have to think too much more about it, right? But I think for somebody who doesn't necessarily know, or for somebody who's thinking, oh, I need to restrict really hard going into the holidays so that I can kind of quote unquote like damage control, right? They're trying to compensate for this pre-planned overeating and binge eating on the holidays by restricting much harder in the days and weeks leading up to the holidays. And this is where it gets tricky. This is where I think there needs to be more guidance addressed around this, and to tell you that you absolutely do not need to do that. And in fact, I think that it can only bring more negative emotions, or it can somewhat damage your relationship with food, damage your relationship to these holidays in general, right? Because if you just see them as kind of like, okay, I need to make sure that I have earned my right to overeat at these holidays, or make sure that I don't screw up all the hard work that I've done by overeating at these meals. That's where it gets a little bit difficult, especially like I mentioned before. Holidays are where overeating and binge eating is it's definitely normalized, but it can also be celebrated almost, right? And so this can give people who constantly deal with overeating somewhat of like a safe space to overindulge, right? Because everybody else is overindulging, right? And overeating. And I actually heard this from Dr. Amelia Thompson. She has a great Instagram, and then also I've had her on my podcast in the past. We talk about relationships with food, and she made a point about this on her Instagram post. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. But I think that we can have these safe spaces to overeat during the holidays. However, some of the clients that I've talked to, they still feel guilty after they overeat. Right. I've had clients say that they feel like they need to take advantage of the holiday overeating because it is a safe space, right? They want to take advantage because they know that all the other, or leading up to the holidays, they were restricting really hard so that they could earn the right to overeat. But then also they know that after they overeat and binge on these holidays, after that quote unquote safe space is gone, well, then after that, they're right back on the hardcore restriction and sometimes even compensation, right? So they kind of punish themselves the days afterwards because they feel like they need to quote unquote make up for the amount of overeating that they did on the holidays. And of course, as you can see, that can create a not so great relationship with food and with the holidays and how you see it. And so I think that the main thing that you should remember as you go throughout these holiday seasons is that you should eat in a way and act in a way that aligns with your values and what you believe is right, and eat in a way that makes you feel in control and happy, right? Not in a way that you feel compelled to eat, and not in a way that you think others are thinking that you should eat, right? Just eat in a way that you feel good about, in a way that you will feel good about after you're done eating as well, right? And this takes a lot of mindfulness. I think this takes a lot of conscious presence whenever you are eating during these holidays, and making sure that you're checking in with yourself and you're reflecting on how you feel, and making sure that you're eating because you're hungry, and not because you feel like you need to finish your plate, or because, again, that you need to quote unquote take advantage of this safe space during the holidays where overeating is normalized, right? And so that's honestly it. Like I know that can be kind of a simplistic way to go about it, but I think that you do what you want to do. Right? You do what you want to do, and you don't do what you feel compelled to do, right? In the sense of by society standards or other people's standards or whatever that means, right? And I think the other thing is control. I don't want you to mindlessly eat or kind of just lose yourself and have a loss of control whenever you're eating, and making sure that, you do this multiple times, because you have one meal maybe around lunchtime, because for some reason Thanksgiving is around lunchtime, dinner is at lunch, right? And then you have leftovers later in the day too, right? And so if you just kind of go into these holidays saying, okay, I'm just going to turn my mind off and just eat as much food as possible on this day because I had permission to, then I think that just like any other day of the year, this type of unconscious eating and eating out of emotion and not out of bodily necessity, right? Not because you're right. You don't finish that plate if you're overly full, right? You just you leave however much is on the plate whenever you feel satisfied. But if you feel compelled that you need to take advantage, or that you need to really make this one count, because you know that afterwards you're going to have lots of cardio and more restriction and all these different things, it's like that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid the unconscious, mindless, emotion-driven eating, and instead we want to have mindful, conscious, empowered eating. Almost is what it is. It's just like you eat in a way that makes you feel good, that makes you proud of nourishing your body in a way that nourishing your body in a way that feels right to you and no one else. Right? That's the key. It's what feels right to you and no one else. And I think that's what you also have to realize, is that people are not judging your eating, right? People, and I know that maybe sometimes people are making comments and things, and I'll talk about that in just a second and wrap this up. But just remember that people are not judging what you're eating, although you may think that they are, because you are so preoccupied with food yourself. So because you're thinking about food so much, you think that other people are thinking the same way, right? And maybe you're judging other people on what they're eating. And maybe that's something that you need to call yourself out on too, because maybe that's what's happening. Maybe you're judging how much somebody else has on their plate, and maybe they're super overweight or something like that. And you're like, gosh, they really don't need that second plate of whatever. And maybe you don't realize that you're the one judging them. And so just in your mind, because you're thinking about this, because you're preoccupied with food, you're thinking that they are also judging you, when in reality, they couldn't give two shits about what you're eating, right? That's probably more of the norm. However, for the people that do make comments about what you're eating or how you look or anything like that, it's like, this is where you have to set boundaries, right? This is again, this stuff all goes for things way outside of just holidays. But whenever people comment on how you look or how you're eating, obviously they shouldn't fucking do that, right? But it's up to you at that point to set some boundaries with them, right? And this is where it's like, okay, it's, I appreciate you, whatever. I appreciate you caring about me or whatever, but it's not okay to comment on what I'm eating, or it's not okay to comment on how I look or whatever it is, right? I think there's other scripts out there that would be better than me, but look up how to figure out setting these boundaries, because I think that is important. And I can promise you, if you just shrug it off, or if you just joke about it, or you just laugh about it, that kind of gives that permission, that behavior gives them permission to continue that behavior. So not only on you, but on other people as well. But I can promise you, if you calmly say to them, hey, that's not okay, most of the time they probably didn't even realize they were doing it. And that can, that makes you feel empowered because you stood up for what you believe is right. And also it makes sure that they don't fucking do it to the next person. Right. So I think that is absolutely very important. And also make sure the last thing here is to make sure that you do set or practice compassion with yourself as you try and navigate these holidays. As there's more events, there's more things that comes up, there's more social activities that you're trying to navigate, you're gonna slip up sometimes. And I say slip up because maybe you do have certain calorie goals or things, and maybe you eat over those calorie goals. And of course, it's not a big deal. You can do whatever you want. However, just make sure that you're nice to yourself. Make sure that you're more compassionate with yourself, more forgiving with yourself as you go throughout this holiday season. And I think that you will feel much, much better for it by the time the New Year's comes. So that is it. I hope that there was something good in there. It's kind of an intangible discussion, right? It's more about the mental side of things. And so I hope that maybe some little nuggets in there were helpful for you. But if you like this, rate, review, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know how you thought about this and if this was helpful. And yeah, that's it. That's Minisode number 160, how to approach dieting around the holidays mentally and physically. Thank you guys, as always, for listening and for watching. See ya.